Hello. Well, my name is Bill Kuttner. Welcome to the West End Museum and our talk tonight, Conquering Boston, Revolution and Evolution. And I would like to, first of all, acknowledge the support of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, whose generous grant made this possible. So, now let me introduce myself. I am a member of the board of the West End Museum. I encourage you to, those of you who haven't been here before, come here sometime and see our West End story. I am a retired transportation planner. I worked at the Central Transportation Planning staff for about 30 years. And one of the things that you learn when you're in this business is how much people take the built environment for granted. You know, it's there, so, or at least that's what I sensed. I realized I am not an expert in this topic. My value added is I realize that this is an important topic that people take for granted, and I assembled some slideshows and put them together in certain themes, and did a little bit of research, and I thought I want to share with people, both experts and people who simply want to learn more about this hard gray stuff. Now, as I go through the show here, if anybody has a question or a correction or a fun fact that I missed, please get my attention, and I'll give the floor to you. So and then when we get to the end, actually, when we get to Boston City Hall, I say, "There's a picture. We're not talking about it until we get to the end, and then we can have at it." And the staff gets sponges to sponge up the blood on the but anyway, so if there's something I say that you want to comment on, the floor is yours. So okay, you can turn it off. We're gotta work this little gizmo here. So. Something that was, at the time, I made this show about 7 years ago. I was for the Middlesex Canal Association. I enjoy industrial archaeology, and I was share with them. And at that time, so a lot of these shots are from 7 years ago. So, which is actually good, because at the time everything was current. Now we can actually have things that pass. That's old Dainty Dot. Cue the tears. Okay, Dainty Dot's gone, and. Now there's a new building there. So, the dawn of reinforced concrete. All right, so here is a viaduct. It's in New York. I believe it goes over the Harlem River. It was built in the 1890s. I learned about it because this is now a pedestrian path that was been opened up. And that is a structure that the ancient Romans would recognize. So what we do is we have stones, and in between them is mortar. As the Romans had mortar. You just take limestone, crush it, put it in a kiln, heat it. You get lime, mix it with clay and ash and sand. Put it aside, and you knead it. Mix it with some water, artfully, and you get stone mortar. That's just in the Roman Empire. They still have aqueducts that work. At least the one in Segovia was still working the last time I was there. Don't ask me when. But anyway, so this is a structure that the Romans have recognized, and all the forces are compressive. They start here and they get to this arch, and the forces are going down. They start to go around. They go down, and they end up down at bedrock, because there's actually bedrock there in New York. So that was in the 1890s, and then let's see. Okay, now really that's Soldiers Field, which is it's all gray, and that was built in 1903, and it evokes the Colosseum in Rome. And here we go to the plaque. You go there, you can look at it, and we're going to read here. Built in 1903, and here we go. The first massive structure of reinforced concrete in the world. Okay. don't think that's hype. But and we're going to ignore the reinforced for a second. So we're just going to talk about, right? I'm just going to talk about concrete here. So there, in close up, today, if you want to form concrete, there's panels. You go to the yard and you take things and bolt them together, and you're ready to pour stuff in. But back then, they had to go and they had to build. You see where they've got, where there were wood boards there. They had to build the structure, and where the Romans making cement, making mortar was labor intensive. They didn't have a lot of machinery. They did manage to make Pantheon, but the Pantheon had no reinforcement. But by this time, by 1903, you can mass produce your mortar. You take your mortar, mix it with gravel, you get concrete. You can build it in large quantities and pour it into your mold, and voila, you've got Harbor Stadium. Now, actually, the rest of the stadium is very complicated with lots of strange forces. But what you see here, evoking the old Roman Empire, is a bunch of arches with a bunch of compressive forces coming down, and the force going down, and I wouldn't say bedrock, because up here it goes down to as far as the piles are supposed to go. So as far as you can drive your piles. And so all this is compressive forces inside the stadium. It's much more complicated. So actually at this time, there were some structures that were built, major structures, without reinforcing steel, such as the Glenfinnan viaduct in Scotland. That looks exactly like this, with a British railroad going on top, and they could produce large amounts of concrete, pour it into a bowl, no reinforcing steel, and then they have a railroad line that still runs today. So as long as you were doing just compression, this system worked just fine. In fact, when did the Green Line subway open? 1897. There are Green Line tunnels with concrete sidings that do not have steel, and they're designed so all the forces are compressive. That said, don't get too afraid. I'm not saying that to frighten people, but the Green Line was built before they moved on. And now what you do can you see that? Is to say 1910. We say now 1910. 7 years later, this is the Lechmere Viaduct, and we have a beam here, and that train is up there. So at the bottom of the beam, it's trying to push the beam down, and it's stretching the bottom of, trying to stretch the bottom of the beam, and concrete is no good at handling tension forces. So what did they do in the reinforced concrete is, ta-da, magic of rebar. Worldwide font of safety and riches, and for those of you who worked on the Big Dig, this is a picture of my grandfather's people found. So the great discovery about rebar was that the coefficient of thermal expansion of steel and cement were the same. So they would both expand in the summer and shrink in the winter, but they were in harmony, so they wouldn't break apart. So suddenly, what you could do is in your concrete structure, you could put the rebar, and that would take your tension forces, and that's how I say worldwide font of safety and riches. Okay, so story. So I'm from California. I went to high school in Southern California in 1968. In the 1960s. Graduated in 68. And I went to school one day, and there was a fence around the library, and a bunch of hard hats hauling the books out. What had happened? Some bureaucrat up in Sacramento had tightened the earthquake, the earthquake breaks, and suddenly our library was no longer in compliance, so they moved it out. So the you know, in California, there's a lot of people talk about waiting for the big one. Big one comes, you want to be in California because they know this, they planned it out. Now, the use of rebar is the standards are well understood. If you're in an earthquake zone, decades ago, I was at the Harvard Coop. I was looking for a book on a workbook, and I pulled one out and said, the Barron study guide says how to set rebar. Okay, so the people the world over, no, if you're in an earthquake zone, you put it there's a certain amount of rebar you use. Okay, so if you're in a position to influence, use the euphemism, a local building, a local construction inspector, you might be able to build your apartment building with a little bit less rebar, and you get a little more profit, and no one will know until the big one hits. And when I first did this, I thought, am I being too cheeky? And then I was getting ready to present it, and then the big one hit in southern Italy. That was on a Wednesday. On Friday, page 1, that says prosecutors in Italy begin investigations of contracted builders. It happened. And even if nobody cheated from today on, there are still many buildings where they cut corners, and we are not going to know until the big one hits in that part of the world. So that's the origin of this wisecrack. But let's see. So rebar. So there we go. This is back in the viaduct. The viaduct is, like I said, 7 years ago. The viaduct was sort of beat up, and now they were. In 1910, they were feeling their way. They had no computers. There was no pre-stressing of the pre-tensioning of the rebar. But it was in there. It doesn't look that elegant, but it's held up, and they have since 115 years, and they have since done things that they need to do to fix it up. And actually, if you look, let me back up again. Okay, look at the size of those beams. Like I said, no computers, no pre-tensioning. They just had to be conservative. That's the way it is. I hope it lasts for another 100 years. And okay, and a revolution in construction economics. And so that's the Bridge of Flowers in Chiltern Falls. One of the things is, first of all, the arch is a little bigger. You can with reinforcement. You can do more things. You can do more things with the stresses. And this bridge was built by a rural trolley line. Now, this is like 1917. I love trains and I love trolleys, but let me tell you that the economics of these rural trolleys is horrible. And it was shut down 10 years later. But the fact that a rural trolley could come up with enough money to pay for this thing simply shows that the price of building large structures had come way down. And also notice it's in the water. We will get to that later. Who came here? Who's interested in water? Who's the water guy? There we go. Okay. Anyway, we will talk about water. So now here, this is built like in 1908, so it's after Harvard Stadium and before and this is in Belmont Center. And look at the labor intensity of that. This is probably one of the last bridges that they built, and it'd be interesting if somebody say why in 1908 they still did this, and it'd be an interesting story. But you can see why pouring concrete with your rebar would be vastly more efficient way to go. And now, all right, everybody knows that. That's George Washington Whistler's Canton Viaduct, and just trying to build, I think, 1835. And I want to point out the versatility of reinforced concrete. So. 1835, and 100 years later, as locomotives get bigger, the steam locomotives, their driving rods keep coming down, and so that, steam locomotives are very romantic. And they have a lot of drawbacks, many drawbacks. One that people don't realize is that those driving rods really beat up the roadbed. So the New Haven Railroad goes and they build some mold, and then they put some rebar in, and then they put some concrete in there, and then concrete, as it doesn't dry, it sets up the atoms sort of break apart and reconnect themselves, and when the concrete sets up, it expands. So it presses itself into there, and this, steam is replaced with diesel and stuff, which is less hard on the viaduct. But this has gone almost a second century now, and I am sure it will go into a third century. So George Washington Whistler had a great initial design, a little touch up there with concrete. It's good for the ages. And all right,
question?
Yeah.
On that last slide, did they also fill in each of those arch openings in addition to the concrete at the top, like those vertical walls? Or those original?
No, I think no. Correct. I believe that all the stonework you see, I believe is original to Whistler. Back then, the arches are a motif to evoke the Roman Empire. So they're willing to put a little bit of stuff. Yeah, and it's also a little more support. And you want to have support every so often. You add a little bit more. So and I expect it on that. So if you know any young people, we've got two term paper projects, 2 term paper topics already. The bridge at Belmont and the Canton Viaduct. Okay, reinforced concrete and water, a love-hate relationship. Okay, so here we go. T-Rex. I love T-Rex. Okay, so there we go. So first of all, now this is the Leechburg Viaduct, and with reinforced concrete, make a nice big arch. If you're in ancient Rome, it would have to go like this. This is much more cost effective. And but now we do is we see the subject of our day, our evening, is reinforced concrete sitting on top of cut granite blocks set on mortar. Why are they doing this on concrete? Yep, modern concrete, old labor-intensive blocks, because the Charles River had deep water navigation with iron, steel hull ships, and the fear was if one of those ships if the pier in the water, like at the Bridge of Flowers, if it was concrete in the water and it hit it, if it had a crack, the water, salt water, fresh water, the same thing, would go in there and begin to corrode the rebar, which would eventually break it apart. So they put the stones. The stone's harder, but if a stone gets moved a quarter of an inch, it's not the end of the world. So that, hence my term, Now here we go. This 7 years ago or 8 years ago, this old Charlestown Bridge, and they had deep water navigation. Those ships are coming right out through there as this used to open up. So here you have cut granite. At the time that they were demolishing this, they thought that there may have been this was built around 1910. They thought that there might be a reinforced concrete core in these things to provide extra structural support, and just have the stones to protect it. So that was an investigation. I do not know what they found. I was told that they were looking. I never found it. Term paper topic number 3. And which brings are we getting young people into the civil engineering profession? I mean, that's the end of the problem. We get young people into the profession, we got all sorts of interesting topics for them to study. So anyway, this has now and when we're done, it's an 8-minute walk from here on my way to my home. I live in Charlestown. The new bridge, the piers are concrete all the way into the water, and they have a lot of fendering. There's some old fendering, but they have a lot of very serious fendering around the piers. But it's concrete all the way in the water. And I'll say before I move on to the next topic here, if you go to Providence, in Providence Harbor, there is now in the inner harbor there's a biped path that crosses over the inner harbor. Very nice, park on both sides. It is built on cut granite piers that were built in the 1950s for Interstate 195 that was going from Providence over to Wareham. It has since been rebuilt. It has been relocated, but the old cut granite piers from the Eisenhower era are still there and now. So when you go to Providence, when you go over there, we're going to say that was a cut granite pier built when Ike was president. So the desire to keep the concrete away from navigation, from serious navigation, was continued. And okay, let me move on here. Oh, okay, now we move to Route 128, Memory Lane, and now we are going to get to everybody's favorite topic, is Art Deco. So there we go. So now we have and these are in these are in Beverly, and I should have a little Google thing. It's Google Earth, and thank you, Google. And anyway, so here you have a reinforced concrete, nice gentle arch there. Here is full height, and when I put this in my show, people say, "Oh, that looks just like the Merritt Parkway in Connecticut." So, which apparently was. And I have not been on the Merritt Parkway, or I did, but I didn't notice. So anyway, so there we go. Art Deco goes very nicely. There's a lot of fluted columns, very, very nicely with concrete. And then we go a little farther up. That's also on Route 128, and this looks very, very New Englandy. Ooh, there's our bridge. So you're going to come in the right lane here, and you got to whack this thing. So this looks very New Englandy, and I think after a mere 30 years, the bridge becomes historical. So if they ever have to replace this, they got to replace everything. They got to make the next bridge look like this. So anyway, so here's another nice gentle arch ready to get hit, and then we go up here. Okay, I think it's here. So many people showed up that we weren't able to show this in the big, in the smaller theater, which is why I believe the edges of these pictures are cut off. There we go. It's graceful. Okay. Anyway, so Thank you for coming. We had to move to the larger room, but so here in the 1950s, the steel industry started being able to roll out larger and larger beams, but concrete is still the go-to material for your abutments. And there you see some fluting, some Art Deco motifs on this 50s era overpass. Now, when I was a transportation planner, they were thinking of rebuilding part of Route 128 because there were bottlenecks, and they were going to rebuild like 3 interchanges. And I did a traffic analysis, and I said, no, you don't have to rebuild all 3 interchanges. If you just rebuild this interchange and make it wider, and make this bridge wider, you'll solve your traffic problems. So, if they rip up this Art Deco treasure, you have me to blame. Okay, so anyway, the Art Deco was used a lot back then. So, what is a skyscraper quotes. So here we have, there, can you see it? That's the Customs House. This is the Ames building. And the Ames building, I think it was built in the 1890s, but so in 1885 was the what we call it, something insurance building in home insurance building in Chicago, where you had a steel skeleton and then you the cosmetic skin around it. That's the traditional definition of a skyscraper. The the Ames building actually came later, is just piles of stones. I believe it is the second highest, I've been told, it's the second highest building without a steel, functioning, not like a monument, but actual building, without a steel skeleton. So this is the Ames building, and then behind it, approximately at least twice as tall as the Customs House, which is like the home insurance. It has a steel frame, as does. So you go down to Isabella Gardner's villa. It looks like the Capulets of the Montague is going to step right out of it. Isabella Gardner's villa is a modern skyscraper. It's it's like the home insurance building. It's got in the Riverside Church in New York is the same way. It's sort of old-fashioned, but it has a steel frame. And Church of Notre Dame in Montreal, another massive building due to a steel frame, Hungarian parliament. Anyway, so you can make with a steel frame. You can have a massive building, even if you're using old-fashioned decorative motifs. So. Okay, now here we go. This is 75 Federal Street, and this is 101 Federal Street, both skyscrapers. Well, let's take a closer look. And here is 75, speaking of Art Deco, and we'll get a little closer. So this is nice. So you build the skeleton, and then you have back then you get bricklayers, and you put out for some decorative things, and then they're all bricks, masonry going all the way up. And then over here, here you got a skeleton, but you have these prefabricated panels, fabricated outside. They drive them in. Truck says the staging area. So just in time, they drive up, they lift it up, they bolt it in. So it's very, very efficient. Doesn't have the charm hold on, but before we move on, I want to show you, here's a dumpster. So I wanted to do this to essentially show the things, and I got the dumpster. So the interesting thing about the dumpster is the award-winning Hancock Building, 200 Kuttner, whatever it's called. You go to the Hancock Building, and we'll just walk around the block. And what's in the back of the Hancock Building? Is loading docks, dumpsters. The buildings need to function. Now, in the Peru, they're underground, but buildings need the support things. So we have to forgive them. They have a dumpster there. They got to put the dumpster somewhere. And there we go. I just wanted to show you that this is our Art Deco, one of our Art Deco treasures here, and we'll see some more Art Deco. Okay, brutalism. That's what people came here for, right? But béton brut, which means bare concrete. That's all that it means, and that's the name. And so there's City Hall. Now I live in Charlestown, so when I walk to City Hall, this is the way I approach it. This is the Congress Street entrance, which now was back then was closed, but it's open now. It's nice way of getting in. And I like this picture because we don't think of Boston City Hall of being a vertical presence. We think it was a horizontal presence, but it helps that I clipped the photo. but I like this view of it, and we're not. I do have some things to say about this, but I'm not going to say about it. We can talk about City Hall later on. And now that's the sign that we usually see, and there's a reason I'm standing at Bowdoin Square, and there's a reason I'm standing at Bowdoin Square, and there's our skyscraper there, the first skyscraper, the Customs House. But here's City Hall, and there are the City Council chambers, and there's the City Council offices, which is at least the high-ranking City Councilors get windows, and this is part of the idea. Is people look at the building and they see the functions. To keep a hole for myself, but the other thing is you got a City Hall in the center, and then there's a plaza around it. Okay, and we all know that already. I don't need a lot of pictures. Now, standing where I am, I have to turn around, and just to turn around, and there is the Hurley Building, the Government Service Center, and I have fond memories out there. I went to the Department of Labor library. I was building an employment database, and I would go through the library to collect that data material. So anyway, the legacy of Paul Rudolph. Okay, show of hands, who's been down to the Met in New York and seen the Paul Rudolph show? It's only going to last a couple more weeks, I think. But they have the Met is displaying his drawing, essentially his drawings are very, very, very artistic. So anyway, and we are going to talk about Paul Rudolph. And so Paul Rudolph sort of had the master plan for that square, that block. I think he designed, I believe, personally, the Lindemann Center, which we'll get to, and then, I think somebody else designed the Hurley Building, which, but the whole general idea was Paul Rudolph's, and let me back up a bit. We are sitting down there. That's where we are. So now, and we're just sort of going around here. Now we have this concrete, and unlike City Hall where it's smooth, this is textured. It's all ripply. Okay, so that's the Lindemann that's the Lindemann Mental Health Center, and okay, and that's the Brook Courthouse, which was built later. The original plan was that the whole thing would have looked like. Now we come in, and there's the stairs, and if they ever, whatever happens to this, and they do have a committee, which our executive director, Sebastian, sits on the advisory committee, and we'll see what happens. I hope that they get some adaptive reuse. But if they ever get a 24/7 elevator somewhere here, then they can reopen this nice this staircase. And let's see. When I gave this talk up in North Billerica at the Middlesex Canal Museum, I said to people I was saving them from having to walk through the Hurley Building. But you have no excuse because you're right down here. You've got to go there and walk and see it yourself. So here, this goes nowhere. That goes somewhere. I mean, the thing I said goes nowhere. There's a locked door at the top. This goes somewhere, and we're going in, and it goes into the bowels of the building, and then there's parking, and then there's a little park, and now that's the Ed Brook Building. So this was going to be surrounded. So remember, I said the City Hall. You had City Hall in the middle, and then the plaza on the outside. And Paul Rudolph's vision was to have the building on the outside, and then the recreational space on the inside. And we'll get a couple more pictures here. And that's at the top of that windy stairs. That's where I was unemployed once. I used to come there to get my check. I also had a relative who went to I used to take to the Lindemann Center for mental health treatment. So I got fond memories of this building. It served me well. And anyway, now we're leaving it helped by working forwards.
So,
What?
can you address the fact, though, that those areas that you're showing are some of the most wide open and completely vacant areas
Oh.
in all of downtown Boston?
Okay.
Nobody goes there, nobody uses them.
Okay.
It's totally isolated from the city.
Well,
I've
the
worked in
problem.
that building for 6 years as well.
Well, nobody works because at the time, the state had vacated all the offices at the time I was taking these pictures.
Okay, but I'm not just talking about pictures, I'm talking about for years, I'm taking decades. Well, I worked there in the 70s to get unemployment too, and I worked there in the 2000s. And I mean, it is vacant. You can just walk around and check out the needles and bottles around that little park right now. So I was
True, you're right. It was never you're right, it was never activated. And the City Hall Plaza was also criticized for not being appropriately activated. So activating public spaces.
But City Hall, you can walk through and get somewhere.
Well-
Here, you walk in there, and where are you? What is this place?
Well, that's fair enough, and then part of its location, you know, what gets activated? Quincy Market got activated. So activating this strange mating dance between, you know, location, desire lines, and commercial activity, you know, and how it works. And if somebody develops that, hopefully there will be, you know, there'll be the magic touch. I mean, Paul Rudolph did not envision this place. I mean, I would seek it out, but I'm a strange bird. Okay, so, and anyway, and then here's actually, hold on. There's people. This is actually this is a good desire line. If you're in Bowdoin Square and you're trying to get to North Station to a hockey game, that's actually a pretty good path.
Right.
You know, then you know. So that's Edbrook. Okay, there we go. There's the Edbrook Courthouse again. And okay, this is First Church on Marlborough Street. Had it burned. Had a fire in the 1970s, and Paul Rudolph was brought to. He reused the old, and he grafted a new building onto the old edifice, and so textured concrete. He likes that, but he didn't pour it. So there we go. So here you see we're in the interior of the church, and they're bricks. And actually, okay, well, I'll wait till later. So that's, and then we move, okay, that's also in the church. And and that's, it would help if I went forwards. It's teeny little. Okay, now, the construction is at 115 Federal Street, which is now done, which we used to call Tommy's Tower, and that's now at 115 Federal Street. And next to it is 133 Federal Street, which was also designed by Paul Rudolph. And it's made of concrete, and I am told it's actually innovative in how he brought utilities into it or something like that. So I have been told.
I can answer that.
Yeah.
The exterior panels actually contain utilities moving up and down through the building. And he had the idea that he wanted to actually make the utilities part of the building, which was a good idea, but when Blue Cross built the building in the early 1960s, they had no idea the explosion of stuff that we have running through the buildings now. So the conduits there, as I understand, are only used there. But he had conduits in the exterior of the building because he wanted the working building to be part of the building.
Good, because I had heard something like that, but it sounded so So innovative, I was afraid to say it. So thank you. I had heard something. So when they were looking for somebody, this used to be a multi-level. Thank you very much. Thank you. This is a multi-level parking garage, and the city was looking for somebody to develop it. And the owner of 133 tried to bid on the work, and if they had won, they would have torn this building down and built a building over both plots. Fortunately, they did not win, so we got 115, and we still have 133 there with its innovative utility design systems. And as I said, systems are important for a building. Now, going on. So, all right, come on, going up. Going down, that is the government center garage, and which is now gone. And then I actually wanted this building, which was the Boston Company. Can anybody see the diagonal reinforcements on there? Okay, you can see it from there. Okay, because that's what I wanted to show. But we're going to talk. So the government center garage, which began just up to here, then they added two floors of offices for the EPA, and it's now been demolished. And so the question is, what's the difference between brutalism and building with concrete? And I will speak only for myself. 50 years ago, remember the Montreal Olympics? And actually there's in 1976, so 50 years ago was 1975. And in 1975, Montreal was facing bankruptcy already. How are we going to pay for this thing? And they went to the architect and said, how come they've got the world's most expensive designs here? So they were arguing with their creative team and into building the 1976 Olympics. And the architect said, concrete is putty in the hands of the architect. So that sort of sticks in my head. So when somebody says, what is brutalism? I think of the Montreal Olympics. So here you have, that's a parking garage. There's only certain things you can do to a parking garage. Actually, I was not here when that thing was built. Sometimes parts could be they can be driven in and lifted on. You can get prefabricated or parts fabricated off-site and brought in. So it's made of concrete, but it doesn't enter into my brutalism discussion. But it's gone in any event, and it took years to take down. Were you going to say something? I thought I saw a hand go up. Yeah.
Before when you mentioned the Blue Cross building,
Yeah.
Is that the building that was known as the Lollipop building?
That's what I thought but Blue Cross has moved around a couple of times. Is that what you meant? The Blue
Yeah,
Cross?
I didn't know which building was he talking about with the
Well,
utilities.
no, the one with the utilities was the, and there we go. That's the Paul Rudolph one, and the Blue Cross I think was over here, but Blue Cross may own several properties.
I thought it was built for them, maybe it was wrong.
Well, actually, it may well have been built for them, and then they may have moved to the Lollipop building. I don't know where Blue Cross moved, but the Lollipop building is over here on Summer Street. This is on Federal Street, and it used to be called Union Warren Savings Bank. Remember that? Yeah. So it's yeah. And anyway, so there. Okay. So here we go. So you build a skyscraper. You have a question?
Yeah, do you know, is it just a feature of the time when these buildings were built, or is it like because concrete lets you do it? A lot of the buildings seem to have a lot of massing up top, and then these weird voids at street level, which to me seem uneconomic.
Well, that's a question about all skyscrapers. Not simply a question of concrete. So what is the role of a tall building in a city? And because the building's tall, can you set up more space in front of it, is that good or is it bad? What's the optimal wall mount? And there, you've totally exhausted my knowledge about that because I am not an architect. But what I want to do is because we've left brutalism, you know, the notion of whether you're building the Olympics or you're building government buildings or something else, it is a style putty in the hands of the architect. Now, concrete is going to become more important than ever and disappear at the same time. Magic. So, build a tall building. It has to be rigid. So you go back. We've all seen the newsreels of the workers working on the Empire State Building. You know, up there, all these girders. The joints of the girders had to take all the torsion forces, you know, wind, everything, anything had to be done by the joints. So as you get up and say, well, maybe we could, if we had a diagonal brace, that could take all that could handle the torsion forces, and then we could reduce the steel on the other. The other steel girders would only need to hold the floors up. They wouldn't have to keep the building rigid as well. So now the thing is, that works. They probably save money on steel from these girders by putting this in. But as you go up there, people lose their view. Okay, well that's the trade-off. So we have this perfectly good building. So the slip form structural core, which I said we started with Dainty Dot, we're going to end sort of in that general theme. Is so I went to South Boston, and so I went to South Boston, and I was able to. There's a parking garage, Massport's parking garage, so I was able to go up there. So I'm going to take a lot of pictures simply because I had a lot of vantage points to take pictures. So we're going to see a lot of pictures. And then before I was coming here, I said, oh, it was 7 years ago, and I took these pictures in South Boston with slip form on a bunch of buildings. And then I went through South Boston again now, 7 years later, and I looked around, and what did I see? I said slip form on a whole bunch of buildings. So in other words, they were, 7 years ago, they were building buildings like crazy, like this. And then today, you go there, and they're just different buildings, and they just move them around. So this is happening all over South Boston. So I don't even know which one this was, but so let's zero in, and okay, and then what you do is you build that core, and your slip form core will provide your rigidity, and then your floor plates, the beams only really have to support. They only have to support the floor. They don't have to give. They don't have to deal with the lateral forces because your slip form core, does that. And okay, so there it is, and I'm going to have to. We'll have another expert. I'm sure this expert here. So that is the mold. They set it up, and let's see. Oh, there we go. There we got some rebar, and then there we're put some rebar in there. So that's why I was able to go to the top of the Massport garage and look down into it. And okay, now here it is before they started building. Now once they've got it, they said, let me back up a little bit. So then they fill this with concrete, and then it sets up, and then they remove this and they slip it up, and then they do it, and then they repeat the process. Now, someone, please tell me, between each layer, do they put something magic on the top of the cement to keep it from setting up, so when the next layer comes up, they'll fuse into one, or are they just held together by the rebar?
They use super high strength concrete because it's not cured when they're putting the floor on above it. So it has to cure enough in a very short period of time to take the weight of the new walls above.
Okay, all right, so to speed, for schedule things, it cures quickly, but then the interface between the two,
It's still hot.
it's still hot? So when you put the other stuff down on it, it'll it essentially fuses and becomes one giant column.
Yeah, and the rebar does its work.
And the rebar as well. Okay, good, thank you. I knew I would learn that. I've been scratching my head now for a long time about that.
There could be a bonding agent if the engineers feel it's necessary.
Okay.
It could depend on the weather or the materials in the concrete.
The weather, time of year, temperature, all of the above. And yes, okay, and then what you do is you start, so that there's down at the bottom, and then you start putting your steel on, which is much lighter. That doesn't look. When I talked about the newsreels of the Empire State Building, they're much heavier than the steel you see there in the Empire State Building. And there you go. This is the there's our slip form, and they're building up. This is in South Boston. And then they put the skin on, and actually, oh no, this is all right. This does not have the banana lot in the seaport. Who's heard of the banana lot? Okay, there was a very small lot. They didn't know if they could find a developer. Well, they found a developer for it, and this does not have a slip form, so they have these diagonal stiff. So they have to put a bunch of diagonal stiffeners in there to keep it stiff. So this is built without the slip form. And there we go. There's in the South Boston, and this is across the street. This is up by North Station. There's the garden, and unlike T-Rex, concrete is still evolving. So that is the end of my talk. Oh, and the wood. Just let me look here. Oh, a little less than an hour. And we have this play for another 30 minutes. We can have Q&A, open discussion. I will tell. Thank you. And I will volunteer. I will volunteer my comment about Boston City Hall. and of course, if anybody wants to come back, we can go back to it. If there's any picture that's so compelling you want to see it, just ask them. Okay. Years ago, I was sitting in my office, phone rang. Apparently, there was a competition for City Hall, and the competition drawings were down at Wentworth Institute, University, whatever they call it. And they were taking the competition drawings, and they were putting them out for on display. And they wanted to keep it open on a Sunday, but they needed a docent. I said, yeah, sure, of course. So I went there, and I was the docent while they had it for all Sunday afternoon. About 6 or 7 people showed up. But I had a chance to go and read, all that stuff. So it was an opportunity for me to really immerse myself in the afternoon. And so I came to have a little more appreciation of what they were trying to do. And since that time, when people tell me, I was like, oh, I can City Hall. Okay. It's okay if you get to City Hall. Okay. Some people claim or assert that City Hall is an important building. But it's incumbent upon them to convince you that it's important. You don't have to. You don't have to agree with it, just because they say it, So that take these people, have them make their case. So I have become. So that's why I tell people who don't like the City Hall. I have become a little more, sympathetic to it. Anyway, so Grace, can we turn the lights on? Yeah. And let me be friendlier so I can see your face. So, do we have any questions, comments, statements? Okay, back here.
Yes, so just in walking around Boston, I just want to make sure I got this right. The slip core, is that the same thing as the elevator shaft or shafts of?
I think the elevators are separate. to people, that is
Because I've
that's a
always-
misapprehension.
I've always assumed when I see that core rising, it's a group of elevators.
So did I. It seems like such a logical,
Yes.
but you think these tall buildings need whole elevator banks. I think what you may actually have down there is a stairwell. You know, like a 911.
The one you showed was stairwell and elevator.
Okay, and what is it? The elevator, it may be the freight elevator, because these things most of these buildings have big have banks of elevators, more than would fit in just the, but they use the slip form, but they didn't